The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started and Dudley had already broken his new chin camera, crashed his remote controlled aeroplane, and first time on his racing bike knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Private Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escape from Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Pierce, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid. But as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of all lot, he was leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite game, Harry. This was why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had a place at Uncle Vernon's old school, Smeltings. Pierce Policus was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local comprehensive. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuffed people's head down the toilet first day in September. He told, "Want to come upstairs and practice?" "No thanks," said Harry. "The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick." Then he ran before Dudley could work out what he'd said. One day in July, Aunt Pentuna took Dudley to London to buy his melting uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Figg's. Mrs. Figg wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tipping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though she hadn't for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting's boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobbly sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for afterlife. As he looked at Dudley in his new knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said she couldn't believe it was her Nickel Dudleykins. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought two of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen. Next morning, when Harry went in for breakfast, it seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in grey water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. "Oh," he said. "I didn't realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things grey for you. It will look just like everyone else when I'm finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on the first day at Stonewall High. Like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell of Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his melting sticks, which he carried everywhere. on the table. I They heard the click of the letterbox and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the post, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "The postcard, Harry." "Make Dudley get it. Poke him with your smelting sticks, Dudley." Harry dodged the smelting sticks and went to get the post. Three things lay on the doormat: a postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was holidaying on the Isle of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twanging like a giant elastic band. No one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he'd never even got rude notes asking for books back. Yet, here it was, a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax sealing bare coat of arms, a lion, an eagle on badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter hedge. "Hurry up, boy!" shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing? Checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marchville," he informed Aunt Pentuna. "Eat a funny whelk." "Dad," said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on some heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open. With one hand and glancing at it, his face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights, and it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the greyish white of old porridge. "Pentuna," he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Pentuna took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. "Vernon, oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon. Stuffing the letter back inside its envelope, Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their neck and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley prominently had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between door and floor. "Vernon," Pentuna was saying in a quavering voice. "Look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps?" You don't think they're watching the house? Watching, spying, might be following us, muttered Uncle Vernon. Wily, but what should we do, Uncle Vernon? Should we write back, tell them we don't want Harry? Could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up down the. No, he said. Finally, no, we will ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. We won't do anything. But I am not having one in the house. Pentuna, didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense? That evening when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. Where's my letter? Said Harry. The moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door, who's writing to me? No one. It was addressed to you by mistake, said Uncle Vernon shortly. I have burned it. It was not a mistake, said Harry angrily. It had my cupboard on it. Silence, yelled Uncle Vernon. And a couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile which looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking you are really getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom. Why? Said Harry. Don't ask questions, snapped his uncle. Take this stuff upstairs now. The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister, Marge, one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys and things that wouldn't fit into his first bedroom. It only took Harry on one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to this room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old cine camera was lying on top of a small working tank Dudley had once driven over next door's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he put his foot through when his favorite program had been cancelled. There was a large birdcage which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was upon a shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bowling at the mother. I don't want him in there. I don't need that room. Make him get out. Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday he'd have given anything to be up here. Today he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his melting stick, been since on purpose, kicked his mother, and threw his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wishing he'd opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the post arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his melting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one, Mr. Harry Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 pivot." With a strong strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him. which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind after a minute of confused fighting, in which everyone got hit a lot by the smelting stick. Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard, your bedroom," he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley, go, just go." Harry walked around and around his new bedroom. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again, and this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters from number 4 first. His head hammered as he crept across the dark hall towards the front door. Harry leapt into the air. He trodden on something big and squashy on the doormat. Something alive. Lights clicked up on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. As they couldn't go through the letterbox, they had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the door downstairs toilet. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nailed all and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could go out. He hummed tiptoe through the tulips as he worked and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air, trying to catch one. Out! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and floor. "That does it," said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly but pulling gray tufts out of his mustache at the same time. "I want you all back here in 5 minutes. Ready to leave. We are going. Just pack some clothes. No arguments." He looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded up doors and were in the car, speeding towards the motorway. Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him around the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, video and computer in his sports bag. They drove and they drove. Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turning and drive in the opposite direction for a while. Shake him off, he would mutter. whenever he did this. They didn't stop to eat or drink all the way. By nightfall, Dudley, howling, he'd never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He'd missed 5 television programs he'd wanted to see, and he'd never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the lights of passing car and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes, cold tin tomatoes, and toast for breakfast. Next day, they had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. "Excuse me, but is one of your Mr. Harry Potter? Only I got about 100 of these at the front desk." Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The woman said, "I will take them," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear?" Aunt Petrona suggested timidly. Hours later, but Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in the car, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a long road, halfway across the suspension bridge, and at the top speed of multi-story car tracking. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Petrona Dudley late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. 3 drops of beat on the roof. Dudley said, "It's Monday," he told his mother. "The great Humberto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with the television." Monday, this reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of the television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthday was never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, he weren't 11 every day. Uncle Vernon was back and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package and didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what he bought to. "Found the perfect place," he said. "Come on, everyone, out." It was very cold outside. The car, Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out to sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One of the things was certain, there was no television in it. "Storm forecast for tonight," said Uncle Vernon, gleefully clapping his hands together, and this gentleman kindly agreed to lend us his boat. A toothless old man came ambling to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowing boat bobbing in the iron grey water below them. "I've already got some rations," said Uncle Vernon, "so all aboard." It was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and chilly winds wiped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached the rock, where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken down house. The inside was horrible. It smelled like strongly of seaweed. The wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a packet of crisps. Each had 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty crisp packet just smoked and shriveled up. "Could do with some of those letters now, eh?" he said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them appear in a storm to deliver post. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't cheer him up at all. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of their hut, and the fierce wind rattled the filthy windows, and Aunt Pentuna found the few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and curl up under the thinnest and most ragged blanket. The storm ragged more and more furiously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer and nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember at all, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slapping hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go, and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20, 10, 9 maybe. He'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1, boom. The whole sack shivered, and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to come in.